What's up, guys? My name is Marty with Exiled Power, and today I'm going to be bringing you the Assassination Rogue Guide for the newest patch, 7.2. I'm going to start off the guide by quickly going over the changes that have been made to Assassination Rogues in 7.2. Now, Blizzard's come out and said that 7.2 is not meant to be a balancing patch. That's going to probably come later in 7.2.5 before Tomb of Sargeras. The way Rogues are playing in 7.1.5 is largely how they're playing in 7.2, but they did make a few tweaks that you should be aware of as you play the rest of Nighthold out. The first one is that they changed Urge to Kill. Urge to Kill is an artifact ability that gives you a full bar of energy when you press Vendetta. That's down from a full bar of energy to 120 energy. You get 60 energy when you press it, and then 60 more over the next 2 seconds. So 120 energy total when you press Vendetta, which is a net loss of energy from what we had before, small nerf there. And the other artifact ability they changed was Poison Bomb. Poison Bomb had a 3% chance to proc on Envenom use. That's down to 2.5%, but it can proc off of Rupture and Envenom now. So you're effectively increasing your chances to make that 2.5% chance happen. I'm not really sure if that's a nerf or a buff, but either way, it is a change. And the last change I want you to be aware of is not necessarily to Assassination specifically, but to one of the rogue legendaries that Assassination used very, very often and to great effect. It is the Mantle of Master Assassin, the crit shoulders. It gives you 100% crit for 6 seconds when exiting stealth. Those shoulders used to be paired with a talent called Subterfuge, and that basically increased that window from 6 seconds to 9 seconds, making Legendary very, very strong. They sever the ties, they sever the synergy between Subterfuge and the crit shoulders, so you can't get that 9 seconds anymore. You can only get the intended 6 seconds now. It's going to shorten your opener, and it's going to give you less uptime on the crit shoulders over the course of the fight. This has become pretty big hit to the Assassination playstyle in 7.1.5. We're still doing very, very well. We're still play similar to how we did before, but openers have had to change a little bit, and the player on the shoulders has changed somewhat. In this guide, I hope to teach you everything that you need to know on how to play Assassination in the current patch to the best of the spec's capabilities. To do that, I'm going to be telling you things about its rotation, talent choices, legendary options, and some tips and tricks that I think go a long way for the spec. So to start off, why play Assassination? Why does it seem like everybody's playing Assassination in Nighthold? Well, simply put, Assassination is doing a lot of damage right now, and its strengths are lent well to the encounters in the raid. Why not play Outlaw? Well, you could play Outlaw and you could do fine with it, but its strengths are geared towards mass AoE. That's things like Scorpion or Spellblade, and outside of those two fights, you don't have a ton of mass AoE, sustained AoE fights. After that, your AoE becomes cleave based or bursty, um, and Outlaw kind of falls off at that point. So its strengths aren't met well. So that leaves Subtlety and Assassination. They do almost the same amount of damage right now, and they have almost the same strengths and weaknesses. The difference is, in my opinion, Subtlety is harder to play and a little bit more frustrating to play. So I play Assassination because I can get the same results that I would with Subtlety, but I have a little bit more brain space left over to focus on mechanics, and that usually makes me a bit better of a raider. Let's talk about what Assassination is good at and what it's bad at. It's not a perfect class or a spec by any means, but it does do great single target damage, maybe the best in the patch right now, especially if you get the right legendaries and trinkets. It has very good 2 to 3 target cleave. It's not going to beat your Shadow Priest, it's not going to beat your Boomkins, but it's competitive for sure. And lastly, as a rogue, we come chock full of utility. We've got that Cloak of Shadows, we've got Feint, we've got Cheat Death, all those things that are going to keep you alive longer than everybody else and put a big smile on your raid leader's face. What we're bad at, though, is target switching. Our cooldown Vendetta only gets applied to one target at a time, and all of our damage comes from dot ramp up, so our target switching is just terrible. We also have pretty mediocre AoE, especially burst AoE. We just don't have the tools like a Chain Lightning or a Blade Storm to compete with that bursty AoE like some of those other classes can. And lastly, maybe what I dislike about Assassination most right now is that it's very legendary dependent. I'll get into what those legendaries are in a little bit. Um, but if you don't have them, it's definitely going to hurt, maybe more than other classes if they didn't get the right legendaries. Now, does that mean if you don't get the right legendaries for Assassination Rogue, you should just pack it up, just give up on it? No, you can still do good single target. You can still be competitive. It's just that you're not going to bury everybody like you could if you had the right legendaries. So let's start from the ground up on the Assassination Rogue. I'm going to start talking about it specifically now. Um, the Assassination Rogue and all rogues are combo point based specs. And what that means is you are going to use weaker abilities that cost energy, and you're going to use them to generate combo points, and then spend those combo points on your harder hitting abilities. Assassination Rogues in particular do all their damage through dots, or damage over time. We have two kinds of dots, bleeds and poisons. And right now, for assassination rogues, there are actually two builds you can take. What do I mean by builds? Well, you can change your stat priority and your talent setup and maybe your gearing setup um, to benefit a certain strength of the spec. In our case, we do damage with poison dots and bleed dots. We have to use both, but you can change your build to make either your poisons do more damage or your bleeds do more damage. And that's because the stat that gives your poisons more damage is different than the stat that gives your bleeds more damage. If you want to go the bleed build, if you want your bleeds to do more damage, you need crit, because what makes a bleed do a lot of damage is the number of times that it crits. Typically, that's going to give it more damage. If you want your poisons to do more damage, you want to build mastery. Our mastery makes all of our poisons do more damage. And so if you go mastery heavy, your poisons are going to be doing a lot. If you go crit heavy, your bleeds are going to be doing a lot. There are talent setups, legendaries, all kinds of things that go into each of these builds to make uh, each of these your focus. Right now, the poison build is pulling ahead. It's what I play, and it's what this guy is going to focus on. If you want to look at an assassination rogue bleed build, you're going to have to go find that elsewhere. From this point forward, I'm going to be talking about the poison build for assassination. All right, so let's talk about the stat priority for the assassination rogue. What you want above all is mastery. Why? Because mastery is going to give your poisons more damage, and that is going to go a long way. After that, you want critical strike. Why? Because every time you crit, you get an extra combo point. Mutilate, our main combo point builder, always hits twice. So if you crit on both those, you can get up to 4 combo points per application of Mutilate. So the more crit you have, the more combo points you're going to have coming in. So you can see my first Mutilate hit for 3 there. That would only hit for 2. That would hit for 3. So the more crit you have, the faster your combo points are going to be coming in. Your versatility is okay. It's not great. Don't focus it, but if you end up with some, it's not the worst thing in the world. And then your haste is pretty garbage for you. You want to avoid haste where possible. All right, let's start off by going ahead and taking a look at the talent choices that the rogue has in 7.2. Keeping in mind, as we run through this tree, we're going to be doing so from the perspective of the poison build, as that build is currently doing better. So to start off in the tier 15, you're pretty much always going to leave this locked into Master Poisoner. Why? Because Master Poisoner makes all of your poisons do flat more damage or have flat increased potency. Specifically, it's going to make your deadly poison do 30% more damage and your agonizing poison do 20% more damage. And in a world where we are trying to get as much poison damage as possible, this talent just plays into that, plays into the idea of the build. Your poisons are stronger, it's going to make you do more damage. Hemorrhage is a talent that would be good for a bleed build, but we're not going to really be concerned with that right now. Elaborate planning. Elaborate planning makes your finish 5 seconds after you use a finisher, you're doing 12% more damage. It used to be very strong in TOV before it got nerfed. Now it sees some very moderate use on some very specific fights. Fights where you can throw out a lot of ruptures, maybe on 2 targets and keep that buff going. But for the most part, I would just leave it in Master Poisoner. I've tried to find fights in Nighthold where I might like to use elaborate poison or elaborate planning, try to get more damage, and I just have yet to find an encounter in Nighthold where I really wanted to use this over Master Poisoner. 30, you're gonna have much the same thing you have in 15. There's kind of a default option, and that is Night Stalker. What does Night Stalker do? It makes your next ability after exiting stealth or from stealth do 50% more damage. So typically what you're going to do is you're going to build up to 5 combo points, smash that vanish, hit a rupture out of that vanish, and that rupture is going to be doing 50% more damage than your other ruptures. But I thought we were going the poison build. Why would we be buffing our bleed? Rupture is a bleed. Well, although we're trying to increase our poison damage, Rupture and our other bleeds still do considerable damage. And in fact, Rupture is still our hardest hitting ability. So that's the one you want to buff. That's the one you want to make do 50% more damage every 2 minutes when you can go in and out of Vanish. Should you take Shadow Focus? You should take Shadow Focus if you want to do less damage and be a disappointment to your raid. Should you take Subterfuge? Subterfuge is odd because it can be very good with a particular legendary setup that I'm going to get into more in a bit when I go over the legendaries. Outside of that, should you ever take Subterfuge? What it does is it allows you to act as though you're in stealth for 3 seconds after stealth breaks and gives Garrote no cooldown during that window. I've seen an argument that in Mythic Plus you can use it to spread all your Garrotes around or spread your Garrotes to a lot of targets, whereas normally, after using Garrote, it goes on cooldown. You can only use it on one thing. Get more bleeds going around. I personally don't like it even in Mythic Plus or ad fights because you spend so much time, so much energy throwing all those Garrotes out that you just put yourself behind. Outside the legendary setup I'll talk about, I would just always take Night Stalker in this row. Tier 45. The go-to talent is Vigor. It used to be Deeper Stratagem, which a lot of you might still have spec'd into. You thought it was still good, but what did Blizzard do? They took the amount that it increased your finishing move by and cut that in half. Your finishing moves used to do 10% increased damage with this. Now they do 5. And so doing that really neutered the strength of the talent, kind of put it out of contention, and it allowed Vigor to storm ahead. What does Vigor do? It gives you 50% more energy as a cap, and it makes your energy regen 10% faster. So the energy regen you're getting allows you to accelerate the process. You're going to get more finishers out. You're going to get more abilities out. And so those abilities turn out to do more damage than the 5% increase from stratagem. So Vigor is the go-to talent here. If you have the legendary boots, Vigor becomes far and away the best. It's the best anyway, but if you get the legendary boots, this talent just runs away with it. This is kind of the legendary dependency I was talking about. There's legendary dependency with Vigor, legendary dependency with Subterfuge. Either way, I would take this talent, but if you get those legendary boots, you're really going to see payoff. And again, I'll talk about that in the legendary section. Should you take Anticipation? Anticipation gives you 10 combo points to use, but you can still only consume 5 at a time. What's the point? It gives you flexibility. If you're at 4 combo points and you smash, mutilate, and it quad crits, you're suddenly at 8 and you haven't wasted anything. So it allows you to be more flexible with your resource, but it doesn't actually give you any more resources or more damage, and so it can't compete. On to 60. 60, my favorite row in the entire thing. Let's start with Leeching Poison. What does Leeching Poison do? It shockingly gives you Leech, and it allows you to leech back some of the damage you do. You're constantly healing up a little bit. It makes you a little bit harder to kill. Elusiveness. What are rogues great at? Soaking things. Elusiveness helps us do that. So we have an ability called Feint, which allows you to take 50% less damage from area of effect attacks. What does Elusiveness do? It makes you take 30% less damage from all sources, whether they're area of effect specifically on you. It's a great soaking tool. If you're that soaking guy in Gul'dan, soaking guy in Tichondrius, Elusiveness helps you take less damage. On to the bread and butter of your rogue, Cheat Death. What does Cheat Death do? Well, let me run you through a scenario. There you are. You're fighting Croesus. You are smashing it. You're about to get that world first parse you've been dreaming of. You're about to be the single target DPS genius that your guild always knew you could be. What happens? You eat a beam. Does that kill you? Does that ruin your parse? Hell no. You're a rogue. You just keep chugging on through. That just procs your cheat death. You keep pushing on through. You down Crotus. You get your world first parse, and your guild now knows that you are the best player that they have. What is cheat death? It's a get out of jail free card. Any fatal attack that would kill you instead procs cheat death, makes you take 85% reduced damage for the next 3 seconds, and essentially just stops you from dying one time. Why is this so great? Because even though you eat just as many mechanics as the rest of your guildies, it allows you to act superior because you can pretend like you're dying less than the rest of them. So always take cheat death. It is phenomenal. Let's go down to row 75. Uh, 75 sees some moderate use, but it's definitely not a super important talent row. Internal bleeding. Whenever you use kidney shot, you have an extra bleed. Well, we're not really concerned with bleeds anyway, and if you're using kidney shot, if you're spending energy on kidney shot, you could have spent that energy on something that would do more damage, so it's pretty useless. These two have some use. Prey on the weak, whenever you sap, blind, kidney shot, cheap shot, see single target CC something, it'll take 15% reduced damage from everyone. It's useful, but rarely, because first of all, you have to find a super high priority ad that you want everyone to do 15% more damage to, that also is stunnable. Those things don't happen very often. If there are high priority ads that are stunnable or blindable, then great, take Prey in the Weak, but you let me know if you find one. And lastly, we got Thuggy. Thuggy is pretty much the go-to raid talent. If you put Garrote on something and it dies, it refreshes the Garrote cooldown so you can reapply it. You still lose the energy if it dies too fast, but at least you don't lose the cooldown, so it has some use there. 90 is a very important talent for assassination rogues in 715. What does it do? Well, if you're a rogue, you always have a poison on, right? By default, you are given deadly poison as your go-to for damage dealing. What does it do? Well, when you attack something, you have a chance to apply deadly poison. What does it do? It just ticks down on them, right? So if you damage all these things, we're going to apply some deadly poisons out here now. All these things have deadly poison on them. What are they doing? They're just ticking for poison damage. Just passively ticking for poison damage as we go along. In this tier, there is an option called Agonizing Poison. Agonizing Poison gives you an extra DPS increasing poison. Now, this one is different because it does not do direct damage as these ones do. See all those? So now we're going to apply Agonizing Poison to everything. So these Agonizing Poisons are going out. But as you can see, they're not ticking. They're not doing any damage. What do? It makes it so whatever they're applied to, you do more damage to whatever it's applied to, and it stacks to 5 times. So let's go ahead and stack this up. Now the Agonizing Poison here, doing 45% increased damage to this. It's not doing direct damage, but I'm doing 45% more damage if I have a stacked up Agonizing Poison on this target. So you're always going to have one of those two poisons on. Agonizing Poison is very good for single target. It's always your go-to for single target. It's pretty good on 2 to 3 target cleave. But after that, you get those 4+, you want that AoE life, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to throw this thing into Alacrity. Alacrity gives you a stacking haste buff. But by taking away Agonizing Poison, it pretty much forces you to take deadly poison. Why do you want deadly poison on ads? Because if you have a ton of ads, you want as many dots running on all those ads as possible. So you're going to get more haste, going to give you more energy regen, so you can get more of these things out. But agonizing poison is good where you can lay into one thing and get the benefit out of that damage. If you have a ton of ads, you want these deadly poisons just ticking all the time. So Alacrity for AoE, Agonizing Poison for single target or 2 to 3 target maybe. Exsanguinate is a bleed build talent. Again, so that pairs with Hemorrhage, we're not really concerned about that. Lastly, the most boring row of all, level 100. Why is it boring? Well, because if you wanted to play Mark for Death, you can't. And if you want to play Death from Above, you also can't. All you can do is pick Venom Rush because it is so much better than the other two options, and there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. What does it do? Well, we have a passive called Venomous Wounds. Every time our bleed damage deals damage to a poison target, which all of our targets should be poisoned and all of our targets should be bled, we're going to get 10 energy back um, periodically. And so that is going to accelerate our process. Without any poisons on, our energy regen as a rogue is pretty terrible. Watch. So I got no poisons on. I'm just trying to do my rotation. Terrible energy regen, almost unusable. I'm just sitting here spamming this button, getting nothing going here, right? So we always need a poison on to get that energy regen. And Venom Rush increases the amount of energy that passive gives back by 3. It's kind of the same thought process as Vigor. If you're accelerating your energy intake, you're accelerating the entire flow of the spec, and you're just doing more damage, right? So that kind of leaves the talents good for now, barring a few legendaries that I'm about to get into. So next I'm going to talk about set bonuses, legendaries, and trinkets. Something that makes this spec extremely interesting and fun, and something that if you don't get the right ones, makes this spec incredibly frustrating. Next, I want to go over legendaries, and specifically the best legendaries that you can get for Assassination in 7.2. Before I do that, I need to briefly go over how our main cooldown Vendetta works. Vendetta is a fairly short cooldown ability that applies a debuff to one enemy unit. That enemy unit will then take 30% increased damage from the rogue for the next 20 seconds. So you can imagine how this ability would account for a fairly large percentage of our damage as Assassination. Well, our best legendary, the Dustwalker's Footpads, makes it so for every 65 energy that we expend, the cooldown on Vendetta is decreased by 1 second. This can lead to us getting out several more Vendettas a fight than we would without the boots. Let's say that we have a fight where the boots allow us to get 3 additional Vendettas out in the fight. That's going to be an additional 60 seconds of 30% increased damage that you now have that you wouldn't have without the boots. You can see how big of a deal that might be. This makes the boots far and away the best legendary and very, very desired by Assassination rogues. The vast majority of high-end parses for Assassination are running these boots. Is it impossible to do well without them? No, I've seen high parses from rogues that don't run them, but it is fairly rare to see that. In most cases, they do have the boots. You want to hope and pray, maybe use the targeting system on the Broken Shore to pick up the Dauntless boost, try to get these legendary boots. They're fairly important for Assassination's damage. After that, our second best legendary is the Mantle of the Master Assassin. This makes it so when exiting stealth for the next 6 seconds, you have a 100% crit chance. So you can imagine how when coming out of a Vanish, that's going to give us a large amount of damage because come out of Vanish, you hit Mutilate. It crits every time, so it gives you 4 combo points. You can immediately Envenom, then you Mutilate again. It gives you 4 combo points again. So you, in your Vanish windows, you have these really big, chunky Mutilate, Envenom, Mutilate, Envenom, Mutilate, Envenom. It gives you a nice little damage spike, and ultimately gives you enough damage for it to be the second best legendary. I want to address that in 715 there was a very particular combo that you would take if you had this legendary. You would take this legendary and you would take Subterfuge, which would increase that crit window from 6 seconds to 9 seconds, give you a lot more flexibility, and it gave you a bigger window to do more damage. You would take Subterfuge, Shoulders, and you would also take this trinket off cooldown, the Draft of Souls. Draft of Souls is a trinket that sends out these little purple pulses of energy that do damage to the target. But if you use the draft while in the shoulder crit window, every one of those pulses would crit. So it did significantly more damage than if you did it outside of the shoulder window. With your 9-second window from Subterfuge, you had enough time to spam out your Mutilate and Venoms, get your energy all the way to 0, and still have enough time left over to use Draft, which would give you a really big opener. Blizzard then said that they were going to make it so Subterfuge no longer gave you that 3 seconds of increased stealth. It would stay at 6 seconds of the crit stealth, whether you took Subterfuge or not. So a lot of Assassination rogues were thinking, well, is it still worth it to take Subterfuge, Shoulders, and Draft together? The short answer is yes, it's still a very potent combo, but it's not as required as it used to be. It used to be that these three things went together every time, no questions asked. They're still good together, but it's not as cut and dry as it used to be. You can still set up that combo. However, since it's not 9 seconds, only 6 seconds now, you lose a couple of mutilate and envenoms that you could have gotten in before if you want to make sure you draft before the crit window ends. So you can't spam your energy just all the way down to 0 and still just have plenty of time for draft. You have to really tighten that up, and it does a little bit less damage, and it's a little bit harder to pull off. Also, some rogues are now taking Draft Shoulders Night Stalker, because the main thing Subterfuge gave you before was the increased stealth window. And so that kind of changes up um, your playstyle somewhat too, because after you come out of Vanish, you have to use one GCD and a certain amount of energy to use your Empowered Night Stalker on Rupture before you can then start doing the Empowered Crit window. I still run the Subterfuge Draft Shoulders combo. The reason that Subterfuge is still viable, even though it doesn't give you the increased stealth, is because it allows you, now that the window is shorter and more precious, to use every GCD and every ounce of energy you have inside that 6 seconds purely on Mutilate and Envenom. Whereas if you took Night Stalker, you'd have to use one of those GCDs and some of that allowed energy on a Rupture to make Night Stalker worth it. So if you take Subterfuge, you can allocate all of your resources in the crit window just to mutilate, envenoms, and possibly empowered drafts. So there are a couple of ways you can go with this now. The synergy between the shoulders subterfuge is still there. It's a little different than it used to be. You used to take it for the increased stealth window. Now you take it so that you can use your stealth window more effectively. But you can honestly go with both of these for both of these now if you have shoulders draft. To that end, do you have to take draft if you have shoulders now, like you did in 715? They were basically a 100% package deal in 715. Now, there are parses where rogues have shoulders and no draft, so that they don't waste any of that 6 second window on draft. They have like frond convergence now, and their crit windows purely go to envenoms and mutilates. I still like to run these together because I think that the draft damage with shoulders is still very, very viable. You have some flexibility in there, but more or less, shoulders boots, no matter what talent setup, no matter what legendary or what trinket setup, they're still the two best legendaries. If you cannot get the shoulders, then next best legendary after that, third best, is the wrists that increase your bleed and poison damage by 30% to targets below 30% health. It's a very good single target and AoE legendary. I actually swap it out sometimes, like on Scorpion. I will swap this out so that all of my spread bleeds, all of my spread poisons when the ads are dying are going to tick harder. It gives me more AoE damage on that fight than the shoulders would. I can also think about doing that with Spellblade and possibly Botanist. But the wrists are still very good. If you get like boots, wrists, that's definitely not a bad way to go. You can still definitely be competitive doing that. After that, all the remaining legendaries are kind of in a bucket of meh. They're all going to be damage increases from not having a legendary, but these three legendaries are big damage increases, or what you want to try to get as much as possible. Um, if you get the other legendary, like the pants have 3 stats, Pride S has 3 stats. That's still very good, but these are the ones. These three are most impactful to the assassination rogue right now. Let's talk about things that are a little bit more inside of our control. Things like relics, bonuses, maybe trinkets. All right, so let's start with relics. What relics do you want to shoot for? You want to shoot for the relics that buff your hardest hitting abilities. In this case, Gushing Wound buffs Rupture. Go for that one. After that, if you have the 4-piece, you could try Toxic Blade. It's going to make your Envenoms do more damage. And your 4-piece makes Envenom do more damage, so there's some synergy there. But why don't I have those? Why do I have Master Assassin? Well, Master Assassin drops the cooldown of Vendetta, which is nice, but only if you have the boots. Why? Because I have my setup in a way where my Vendetta is the same length cooldown as my Kingsbane, about 45 seconds. And I do that with a combination of the boots and these relics. Without the boots, even with these relics, you can't drop Vendetta enough to line up with Kingsbane. You're going to be waiting on one of them. So if you have the boots, I would say pick up 2 or 3 of these Master Assassin relics. I like to go 2 because if I have 3, it's almost too much cooldown. And my Vendetta is actually ahead of my Kingsbane, so I usually go 2 of these and 1 of these. If I have the boots, if not, leave Master Assassin by the wayside. You need the boots for it to really be useful. After that, let's talk about set bonuses. So our 2-piece causes our Mutilates to apply a bleed to targets when Mutilate is cast upon them for 30% of the Mutilate's strength. Does this change our playstyle? A little bit. If you're hitting multiple targets, Mutilate is another bleed you can spread around now. Um, if you're dealing with one target, pretty much unchanged. Our 4-piece makes it so every time we use Envenom, it deals 10% increased damage per bleed we have on that target, which is normally Garrote and Rupture, but now we also have our Mutilate dot from our 2-piece, so up to 30% increased damage in this build. Yes, Hemorrhage is another bleed you could throw on there for 40%, but it's not better. It's not worth it for the Master Poisoner trade-off. Does this change our playstyle? A little. You want to be more choosy and make sure you're trying to envenom targets that are bled up so that your envenoms are hitting harder. They're not massive game changers. They're nice little boosts. You have to kind of think about them. I would track the Mutilate bleed to make sure that it's there before you envenom as a suggestion. For Trinkets, Convergence of Fate is very good because it also drops our Vendetta cooldown. That's pretty much our go-to as Assassination. You're going to want to go ahead and get that. I have my draft because it works very well with my shoulders, my crit shoulders. If you don't have the crit shoulders, I would go for something like a high level mastery stat stick or possibly um, the Night Bloom Frond off of spell or botanist. This trinket can do a theoretically best in slot damage, but the proc rate on it is very hard to work around. You need it to double proc to really get the damage. Frond is a decent option if you don't have the right legendaries, maybe Convergence Frond. Draft still can do okay damage, but if you don't have the shoulders, not really that great. And then like something like an Urn or an Eye of Garam with Mastery, those always go a long way. Lastly, consumables. Start your fights with a Potion of the Old War. You're hitting so fast and so often in your opener that this is going to do the most damage. And then go ahead and prolonged power pot halfway through the fight or whenever your second pot comes up. You would not be hitting as fast or often generally unless you lust later. And so the prolonged power is going to do more damage. It's going to give you flat stat. You can utilize that for a whole minute inside of the fight. All right, guys, let's go ahead and look at the opener and rotation for Assassination. So I've switched off of draft and I've switched off of my mantle. I'm going to do a more traditional opener, more traditional rotation with gear that most people probably have. So you're going to want to start in stealth, hit your pre-pot. You're going to want to go over here, open with Garrote, Mutilate, Rupture. Then you want to build up to combo point cap, Vanish, Rupture, Vendetta, Kingsbane, and then just proceed with your normal rotation. What is your normal rotation? You want to keep all of your bleeds up. You want to keep your Garrote bleed up. You want to keep your Rupture bleed up and your Mutilated Flesh bleed up. When do you refresh these bleeds? You refresh Rupture when there's about 6 seconds left on it, and you refresh Garrote when there's about 4 seconds left on it. If you're at max combo points and this is not ready to be refreshed, you're going to want to go ahead and hit Envenom to dump those combo points. Okay, now you'll see that I'm using my finishers at 4 combo points and 5. That's because the way Mutilate works, it always gives you 2 combo points, but it could give you up to 3 or even 4. And so if I'm at 4 and I hit Mutilate again, I'm probably going to waste combo points. It's going to give me at least 2. One of those combo points is going to waste. So you want to use your cool finishers at 4 or 5 combo points. Okay? Other than that, try to use Kingsbane and Vendetta together and keep the bleeds up and Filth and Venom. It's very simple at its basics. Now, what'll make you better than the Assassination Rogue next to you is your ability to use Surge of Toxins. It's in our artifact tree. Essentially, every time you use a finisher for the next 5 seconds, you're going to do more poison damage. So your ability to use this well is going to make you better than the guy next to you. I'm tracking it right here. And so what I'm doing is I am trying to use an Envenom before this bar is done. Why? Because Venom does poison damage. And the Surge of Toxins buff makes you do 10% more poison damage 5 seconds afterward. So what I'm doing is I am just trying to keep this bar going as long as possible, trying to get Envenoms in there and never let this fall off. That is going to cause you to do way more damage because Envenom is increased based off of your Surge Toxin buff. So right there, I couldn't make it back to 4 or 5 combo points, and so the buff fell off. You're never going to be able to keep it up forever, right? And you don't want to use a 3 combo point just to keep it going. Your goal is to get to at least a 4 combo points, hit Envenom to keep that buff going, and also not let Rupture fall off. So this is the intricacy of the Assassination Rogue, using your Surge of Toxins well. There's also something here called a Poison Bomb. It's also an artifact ability that procs and lasts for several seconds, does extra poison damage. It's RNG. But you don't want to just spam everything down, because if you get that and then you get another one right after and you refresh it, then you're going to lose all of that damage. So sometimes what you will see me do is I will pool energy, wait for that to get all the way down to the bottom. I could hit it now, but I'm going to wait for it and then hit it right at the end. Why? I'm getting the most time out of that buff that I possibly can. And if I were to proc a poison bomb, see, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose it here. Lost it. If I were to proc a poison bomb, I wouldn't overwrite that with another poison bomb, right? So this is the basic rotation, and if you can track this and use your envenoms inside that window, it's going to go a lot further. So to do AoE damage, how is our rotation going to change? Well, to do our AoE damage as Assassination, essentially we just need to spread our bleeds to more targets. Essentially, you're going to take the same bleeds that you've been using anyway and try to get them on as many targets as you can. The first one is Garrote. Now, Garrote is sort of an exception because the cooldown of Garrote is roughly the same duration as the length of it itself. So you're only going to be able to get Garrote on your primary target, but you should keep it on your primary target. After that, try to get Ruptures on as many targets as you can. Rupture's your hardest hitting ability, and so you're going to want to spread that around to multiple targets. The nice thing about Rupture is its damage does not decrease based on the combo points spent on it, only the duration is. So the more Ruptures you get flowing, this is how you're going to have the majority of your AoE damage coming in to get Ruptures on all of those targets. If you have Ruptures on all of your targets, a huge percentage of your AoE damage can come from that right there, your Poison Bomb, which is a proc to proc off of your Envenom. So you're going to want to go in, Garrote, spread Rupture to all of your targets, and then you are going to want to try to proc Poison Bomb to explode on all of the enemies. That is the majority of your AoE damage, Rupture, and the Poison Bomb. If you're dealing with 2 enemies, keep using Mutilate. Try to spread your Mutilated Flesh dot to both enemies too. So if these are my 2 enemies, I got my Rupture, my Garrote, my Mutilated Flesh. Going to come over here, and we're going to have Mutilated Flesh and Rupture, and we're just going to try to keep the dots up on both of them, and if those dots are not ready to fall off, we're going to fill with Envenom. When you hit 3 targets or more, you're going to start using Fan of Knives instead of Mutilate. Now, if you really want to min-max, you can try to throw Mutilates in also just to keep up your 2-piece set bonus bleed. But for the most part, it's going to be 3 targets or more. Keep rupturing them, keep corroding one of them, but you're going to, instead of filling with Mutilate, you are going to fill with Fan of Knives. Fan of Knives does more damage than Mutilate when you are at 3 targets or above. Now, these are pretty general rules for a raid scenario. For things like Mythic Plus, Assassination can't perform well in Mythic Plus on mass AoE pulling, but it does take some finesse. It is not the easiest thing to do. That is probably for a separate guide. If there's interest, I could possibly put together a Mythic Plus guide. Let me know below if that's something you'd like to see. Now, the last thing I'd like to talk about before I finish out the rotation part of the guide is to talk about some of the little tips and tricks that I think go a long way for the spec that didn't fit into the general topics. The first one being, as I've already talked about, Surge of Toxins. I did go over that in the main single target rotation. That is the most important thing that you can do to min-max your rotation. Now that I've gone over the major components of the single target and AoE rotation, there are a few small tips I'd like to go over that can give your damage just a little bit more of an edge. At the start of the video, I mentioned an artifact ability called Urge to Kill. Urge to Kill gives you energy back whenever you press Vendetta. It gives back 120 energy, so you want to make sure that you are at 50 energy or lower when you press Vendetta. Otherwise, some of the energy that's returned upon pressing Vendetta is going to go to waste. So when you're about to go into a Vendetta, try to spam it down to fairly low, sub 50 energy before you hit it. I also mentioned that it is okay to use a finisher at 4 combo points or 5 combo points. And again, the reason is if you use a mutilate at 4 combo points, you're going to waste potential combo points. So you want to finish off if you hit 4 or if you hit 5. Obviously, if you can make it to 5, that's going to do more damage than if you just take the 4 combo point finisher. So if you make it to 4 combo points and you have either an unused Kingsbane or a Garrote, you can try to fill that up to 5. If you're at 4 and you need to refresh your Garrote, hit Garrote, get it to 5, and then finish. While it is okay to finish at 4, it is always going to behoove you to get to 5 when you can without wasting resources. Obviously, if you have a Garrote up, but Garrote doesn't need refreshed, don't try to fill to 5. Only fill to 5 if the opportunity presents itself, but watch out for those. And the last thing is in 7.2, we got a fourth golden trait, a new golden trait. It's called Sinister Circulation. And this makes it so every time we have a successful application of our lethal poison, the cooldown of Kingsbane is reduced by half a second. Ultimately, this means that you're going to have significantly more Kingsbanes per fight than you did in 7.1.5. We used to try to sync up all of our Kingsbane uses with our Vendettas for maximum damage. Now that you're getting so many more Kingsbanes, you don't line them up like you used to. You essentially used Kingsbane and Vendetta independently from each other. If they turn out to be a few seconds off, you can wait a few seconds and line them up. That'll help. But for the most part, you can use them independently. I would suggest that if you use a Kingsbane outside of your Vendetta window, that you're going to want to have a decent amount of energy pooled. The reason is you want to keep up Surge of Toxins throughout the entire duration of your Kingsbane, even outside of Vendetta, so that it's doing the 10% more damage. As a quick suggestion, guys, try to also keep in mind the length of time that whatever you're hitting is going to be alive. A dot's damage just balance around the amount of time it lasts. So in this case, this is lasting 18 seconds. So to get the damage out of it, it needs to tick for 18 seconds. If this dies 5 seconds in, you're going to lose a lot of damage. So if you're going to come up against an ad that's going to die in 5 seconds, maybe just go for the Envenom. You don't have to spread your ruptures to things like the small ads on Scorpion. If they're going to die in 2 seconds, don't waste your time with a dot that is just going to fall off right away. Alright guys, last thing I want to go over is the unique opener that you can do if you have the Mantle of the Master Assassin and the Draft of Souls. If you're able to pick up these two pieces of gear, you can do an opener that is different from the traditional Assassination opener that does significantly more damage. So if you are able to learn this opener, it's going to benefit you greatly in whatever PvE encounter you want to do. Now to get this down, it's probably going to take you a couple of tries, maybe a couple of rewatches, maybe slow the video down. It's going to go kind of fast as I do it. Just give it some practice and you should be able to get it no problem. So I'm going to go up, Garrote, Mutilate, Rupture, Mutilate, Vendetta, and Venom, Kingsbane, Mutilate, then we're going to Vanish and Venom, Mutilate and Venom, Mutilate, then we're going to get Draft off as fast as we can, try to get all those crits, and then we're going to, from there, proceed with our traditional opener. Now, while doing that, you get to a point in the crit window where you can either try to draft and then mutilate at the end of the window, or mutilate and then draft to finish out the window. If you can get the mutilate in before the draft, it does a little bit more damage, but it took me a little bit longer than normal, and so my crit window ended slightly before drafted, so I lost a little bit of damage there. Probably should have taken one less mutilate and drafted one GCD earlier, and then tried to mutilate at the end of the crit window. Those little nuances will come to you as you do it more and more and more, and you'll be able to feel out whether or not you're going to squeeze that in. But that's going to go ahead and wrap up the Assassination Rogue Guide 472. Remember, guys, my name is Marty with Exiled Power, and thank you for watching.